Have you ever watched the twilight fade and wondered what happens to the wild world when we finally close our eyes? We assume the meadow simply stands still in the dark, waiting. But beneath the cool, damp soil, and within the tightly folded petals of the evening primrose and ancient, profound architecture of rest is just beginning. Tonight, we will learn how to truly sleep from the plants themselves. When the fading sunlight shifts its spectrum, the phytochrome receptors in the evening primrose detect the exact ratio of red to far red light, signaling the end of photosynthesis. And right now, the photoreceptors in your own eyes are sending a remarkably similar signal to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, instructing your pineal gland that it is time to release melatonin. Research published in the Journal of Experimental Botany details how this exact twilight threshold triggers a massive metabolic shift within the plant, altering its cellular respiration for the dark. Just as your own body is currently lowering its core temperature and slowing your heart rate, preparing to shift your brain waves from the rapid beta of the waking day into the slow, synchronized delta waves that define the architecture of deep, restorative sleep. Notice how the tightly packed sepals of the primrose bud begin to lose their structural tension, as motor cells at the base of the petals deliberately alter their internal turgor pressure, allowing water to flow out of specific cellular vacuoles, which slowly unzips the floral casing, mirroring the way your parasympathetic nervous system is actively dissolving the tension in your jaw, releasing the accumulated physical bracing from your shoulders, your neck, and your entire spine, as your biology gently down-regulates the sympathetic fight-or-flight circuits that kept you alert all day. As the evening primrose enters its deep nocturnal rhythm, its microscopic stomata begin to close, preserving vital cellular moisture in the cool, dark, mirroring how your own thalamus is now quietly closing the gates to outside sensory input, protecting your fragile sleep architecture from the disruptive noises of the waking world. Studies in plant physiology indicate that the nocturnal release of volatile organic compounds perfectly aligns with the cooling of the ambient air, casting a sweet, invisible mist. Just as your brain now initiates its own invisible clearing process for the night, activating the glymphatic system to gently wash cerebrospinal fluid through your neural pathways, sweeping away the adenosine that accumulated during your longest, most exhausting waking hours. Deep inside the plant cells, the frantic energy of daytime photosynthesis is gently replaced by the slow, deliberate rhythm of cellular respiration, burning stored starches for quiet warmth. And your body is doing the exact same thing, slowly lowering your core temperature, diverting warmth away from your center and out toward your heavily resting hands and feet, allowing the primrose to conserve its structural energy while opening completely to the night, allowing your muscles to surrender their last remaining tension into the mattress beneath you. At the absolute deepest point of the night, typically around 2 in the morning, the evening primrose reaches a state of profound metabolic suspension. Its cellular turgor pressure stabilizes completely, halting all unnecessary vertical growth, mirroring the exact moment your brain enters its most profound slow-wave sleep, where heavy delta waves roll across your cortex at less than 4 cycles per second, Clinical sleep researchers observe that during this specific slow-wave phase, your brain consumes significantly less glucose, shutting down active cognitive processing. To prioritize the structural repair of muscle tissues and the consolidation of memory, just as the primrose ceases all daytime metabolic functions to solely maintain its open blossoms, the floral tube becomes perfectly still, presenting a stable landing pad for nocturnal pollinators, while your own body achieves a protective state of muscular atonia, preventing you from physically acting out the subconscious healing processes happening within. Notice the passive collection of atmospheric moisture along the epidermal cells, a process requiring zero energetic output from the resting plant. Much like how your immune system passively receives an overnight surge of protective cytokines. As the Earth's rotation brings the first subtle shifts of pre-dawn light, the evening primrose begins its final phase, initiating floral senescence for the mature blooms, triggered by a highly localized release of ethylene gas within the plant tissues, parallel to the way your brain has now successfully cleared its vast adenosine buildup, leaving your neural receptors clean and unbound, naturally lifting the heavy pressure of sleep. A recent neurobiological review notes that the cortisol awakening response begins quietly in the dark, gradually increasing your resting heart rate and core temperature, preparing you for conscious thought. Just as the primrose actively withdraws water from its petal cells, intentionally collapsing the blossom to protect its delicate reproductive structures from the harsh ultraviolet radiation of the coming sun. Your pineal gland senses this exact same shift in the ambient light spectrum and definitively halts the production of melatonin, completing the biological circadian loop. The deep, slow delta waves of the night begin to ripple into faster alpha frequencies, as the botanical world around you shifts its metabolism back toward active daytime photosynthesis. Both you and the wild flora have completed the necessary architecture of cellular repair, ready to meet the daylight with restored chemical balance and absolute biological quiet. As the night cycle deepens once again, cellular activity inside the evening primrose undergoes another shift. Botanists have tracked how intracellular calcium ions flood the cytosol when the light completely vanishes, acting as a secondary messenger system that signals the plant to halt diurnal protein synthesis. This calcium-driven chemical cascade mirrors the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis currently studied in human sleep laboratories, which proposes that your slow-wave sleep actively downscales the synaptic connections formed during the day. By selectively weakening these neural connections, your brain conserves metabolic energy and prevents cellular overload. Just as the primrose conserves its synthesized starches by shutting down unnecessary enzymatic reactions at night, observe the microscopic mitochondria within the plant cells, quietly converting stored sugars into ATP, without the assistance of solar radiation, operating entirely on the energetic reserves gathered hours ago. Your own neurons are currently engaged in the exact same process of metabolic ATP restoration, replenishing the cellular fuel required for the hippocampus to transfer declarative memories to the neocortex. Research in the journal Sleep confirms this memory transfer peaks during the deepest delta wave oscillations. The plant's cell walls simultaneously undergo enzymatic stiffening in the dark, stabilizing their physical structure, while your brain stabilizes its cognitive architecture. physically cementing the neural pathways of essential information. A shared biological mandate across species, using the darkness to structurally secure what matters most. The surface of the evening primrose leaf in the dark is not an empty landscape. It is a thriving nocturnal ecosystem known to botanists as the phyllosphere, where millions of beneficial microbes multiply rapidly in the safe absence of daytime ultraviolet radiation. As the plant actively secretes sugary exudates from its epidermal cells to feed this microscopic community, cultivating a living, biological shield that protects the resting tissue from harmful nocturnal pathogens, mirroring the profound immunological fortification your own body is performing right now in the dark. Research published in the Journal of Experimental Medicine confirms that during this phase of slow-wave sleep, your immune system shifts away from daytime surveillance and into a state of highly active repair, releasing specialized signaling proteins called cytokines in heavy concentrations into your bloodstream, which quietly coordinate your body's response to systemic inflammation and begin repairing cellular damage. Notice how the plant's closed stomata and the microbial biofilm work in absolute biological synergy. Just as your T cells, the highly specialized immune soldiers that identify and neutralize internal threats, become significantly more efficient at attaching to their targets during this specific phase of deep rest. Both the wild flora and your sleeping biology use the absolute, undisturbed quiet of the night to build the invisible, powerful defenses that will allow you to safely meet the coming day. As the deep sleep phase solidifies, the evening primrose must manage its internal temperature. Without the thermal radiation of the sun, the plant's metabolic engine slows significantly, allowing it to passively release remaining heat through microscopic transpiration into the cool air. This botanical thermoregulation requires almost no active energy, placing the plant in total structural rest, mirroring the profound cardiovascular recovery occurring within your own body right now. Cardiologists refer to this critical sleep phase as the nocturnal dipping period, where your parasympathetic nervous system takes full control, intentionally slowing your heart rate and allowing your blood pressure to drop by 10 to 20% from its daytime baseline. This vital reduction in systemic pressure gives your blood vessels and heart muscle a profound, necessary rest. Without this nocturnal dipping, the cardiovascular system would carry its daytime workload into the night, leading to accumulated cellular stress over the years, similar to a plant constantly fighting drought. But right now, both your body and the primrose have successfully entered the safe harbor of metabolic downregulation. The plant's internal fluids move sluggishly, demanding nothing of its cellular engines. And your heart beats with the slow, effortless rhythm of a system that knows it is entirely secure, letting the cool darkness do the silent, vital work of extending your biological longevity. Beneath the visible surface of the wild meadow, the evening primrose extends its biology underground, where its intricate root system enters a state of deep, passive nutrient exchange, connecting with the rhizosphere and the vast, invisible mycorrhizal fungal networks in the dark soil, allowing water and essential minerals to slowly diffuse across the cellular membranes without active pumping. This deep, structural anchoring in the earth perfectly mirrors what your motor cortex is doing. Research in the Journal of Neuroscience confirms that during this phase of slow-wave sleep, your brain selectively consolidates procedural memories, taking the physical movements you practice today and permanently etching them into your neural architecture through a process called long-term potentiation. Just as the primrose physically solidifies its root grip into the cooling nighttime earth, your brain strengthens the exact synaptic connections required for balance, coordination, and physical muscle memory. Every physical skill you learn today is being refined in the quiet dark of your cortex, guided by the slow delta waves and sleep spindles generated deep within your thalamus. By surrendering active movement, both the resting flora and your sleeping body achieve the ultimate structural fortification, locking in the physical adaptations needed for tomorrow, allowing you to wake up physically smoother, more coordinated, and fundamentally structurally renewed. As the slow wave pressure finally dissipates, a profound shift occurs in the architecture of the night. The structural lockdown of the plant cells begins to soften, replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible activity. This biological transition mirrors the exact moment your brain rises from the depths of delta waves and enters the highly active, paradoxically awake state of rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. While your major muscle groups remain safely paralyzed in protective atonia, your eyes begin darting frantically beneath their closed lids, tracking the vivid imagery of your dreams. In the meadow, this rapid movement is perfectly mirrored by the accumulation of heavy midnight dew, which gathers on the broad leaves and suddenly rolls off, causing the plant to twitch and shudder. A series of erratic, micro-botanical movements in the otherwise completely silent dark. Neurologists note that during this intense REM phase, your brain's emotional center, the amygdala, becomes up to 30% more active than when you are fully awake, processing the difficult emotions and unresolved experiences of your day in a neurochemically safe environment. While the prefrontal cortex, your center for logic and rational constraint, is entirely shut down, allowing your mind to generate bizarre, wildly creative dream landscapes without any internal judgment, until the REM cycle concludes, and both the dreaming mind and the shivering plant return to absolute peace. As the rapid eye movement cycle concludes, the sleep architecture requires a brief transitional reset. Out in the meadow, this is mirrored by a sudden, subtle shift in the nocturnal wind, forcing the evening primrose to recalibrate its physical posture against the changing aerodynamic pressure. Neurologists classify this exact human transition as a micro-awakening, a brief cortical arousal, where your brain temporarily rises from deep unconsciousness to briefly scan the external environment, reactivating your auditory cortex just enough to ensure the surrounding habitat remains perfectly safe. Just as the microscopic trichomes on the plant stem detect minor fluctuations in ambient temperature, during this split-second arousal, your motor cortex sends a brief, targeted signal to your musculature, prompting a subtle shift in your sleeping posture to optimize blood flow and joint alignment. Exactly as the primrose shifts its structural weight to anchor against the new wind direction. These micro-awakenings are rarely remembered, yet they are biologically essential for maintaining continuous rest. Once the brain's threat detection circuitry confirms absolute environmental safety, the arousal instantly subsides. The wind in the meadow softens, and the plant stem locks back into rigid stillness, while your neural frequency immediately drops back down, descending smoothly into the next non-REM phase, initiating the second, seamlessly connected cycle of your profound biological recovery in the dark. As the second sleep cycle establishes itself, the environment around the evening primrose grows more complex. Nocturnal animals move through the underbrush, creating sudden acoustic and physical vibrations. Yet the plant remains in a state of deep, undisturbed suspension, mechanically filtering out the noise. In your sleeping brain, this mechanical filtering is actively performed during stage 2 non-REM sleep, a phase characterized by sudden, protective bursts of neural activity known as sleep spindles and K-complexes. Sleep spindles are generated by the reticular nucleus of your thalamus, firing rapidly to block incoming sensory data, effectively muting the ambient noises of your bedroom. A passing car, a shifting house settling in the cold. K-complexes operate as a secondary defense, releasing massive, slow-voltage drops across the cortex to suppress cortical arousal and forcibly maintain the architecture of your unconscious state. Just as the thick, water-filled epidermal cells of the primrose absorb and dampen physical vibrations from the wind, your thalamus actively shields your sleeping mind, allowing you to rest securely in environments that are not entirely silent. Research confirms that individuals who generate a higher density of sleep spindles are significantly more resilient to external noise disruptions, remaining deeply anchored in their restorative cycles. By surrendering to this biological shielding, both the flora and your own nervous system ensure that the delicate, vital work of cellular maintenance can proceed without interruption. As the night progresses into its second rapid eye movement cycle, we turn our focus back beneath the soil, to the root's endodermis, where a specialized cellular barrier called the Casparian strip operates, acting as a highly selective biological filter, actively pulling essential potassium and nitrates into the vascular cylinder, while physically blocking toxic heavy metals and harmful soil pathogens from entering the plant's circulatory system. The evening primrose absorbs only the compounds required for its future structural integrity, leaving behind the toxic elements that would ultimately degrade its delicate vascular tissue. This intelligent botanical filtration mirrors the emotional memory consolidation happening in your brain right now. During REM sleep, your amygdala and hippocampus work in perfect tandem to selectively process the difficult, highly stressful experiences of your waking hours. Botanical researchers and neuroscientists both observe this fundamental mechanism of biological survival. Your brain systematically strips away the painful emotional charge of a memory, the toxic weight, while permanently storing the essential informational lesson into your cortical archive, just as the plant filters the soil to build a resilient stem for tomorrow. Your sleeping mind filters your experiences, building the profound emotional resilience needed for the coming day. As your brain navigates the fragile boundary between the end of one sleep cycle and the beginning of the next, it enters a profound liminal space. Out in the meadow, the evening primrose physically mirrors this exact transitional surrender. Botanical studies of the pulvinus, the microscopic hinge-like structure at the base of each leaf, reveal that at this specific hour, cellular turgor pressure drops to its absolute minimum. With hydraulic support fully withdrawn, the plant's architecture can no longer resist gravity, allowing the heavy, moisture-laden leaves to droop to their lowest possible nighttime angle. This total gravitational surrender corresponds perfectly to the brief hypnagogic and hypnopompic states, where your own brainwaves temporarily mix the slow theta of light sleep with the lingering alpha frequencies of near wakefulness, creating a fleeting sense of weightlessness. This is the precise neurological window where the sensation of falling often occurs, as your motor cortex briefly misinterprets the absolute relaxation of your muscle tone. Just as the primrose yields completely to the physical downward pull of the earth, your nervous system is simply testing the depth of its own physical release before safely anchoring you into the heavy, motionless descent of the next deep cycle. In the final hours of the night, a profound anticipation occurs within the botanical architecture. Long before the first direct sunbeam strikes the meadow, the evening primrose begins its photoprotective cascade. Botanists observing chloroplast movement note that these organelles physically reposition themselves along the cellular walls, preparing to safely absorb incoming photons without suffering oxidative damage from sudden ultraviolet exposure, while simultaneously synthesizing protective antioxidant compounds within the leaf's intricate mesophyll layer. This anticipatory biological defense perfectly mirrors your own endocrine system's pre-dawn protocol, where your adrenal glands quietly initiate the cortisol awakening response while you are still deeply asleep. Research published in Psychoneuroendocrinology confirms that this sharp, orchestrated rise in cortisol is not a stress reaction, but a vital biological ignition sequence required for conscious transition, gradually accelerating your cardiovascular engine and elevating your core body temperature from its nocturnal baseline. Just as the primrose actively shifts its internal fluid dynamics to face the rising thermal load, your brain transitions from the slow, synchronizing delta waves of deep restorative sleep into the faster, alert beta frequencies, safely lifting you out of physiological paralysis. Both you and the wild flora use this invisible preparatory window to bridge the dark and the light, arming your cells with the precise chemical resilience needed to safely withstand the coming day. While the diurnal world awakens to the full intensity of the midday sun, the evening primrose enters its secondary cycle of biological conservation, idinal rest, tightly binding its petals to minimize surface area and prevent critical moisture loss. This daytime metabolic withdrawal perfectly mirrors the neurobiology of the human power nap. During the natural circadian dip that occurs in your early afternoon, a brief, 20-minute period of light sleep effectively begins clearing accumulated adenosine. Just as the closed primrose shields its delicate reproductive core from solar exhaustion, this micro-restoration gently reboots your prefrontal cortex, restoring executive function and focused attention, without allowing your brainwaves to drop into the heavy delta frequencies, protecting you from the severe cognitive disorientation known as sleep inertia upon waking. Notice how the resting plant still passively draws water through its deep taproot, paralleling how a brief nap lowers your blood pressure and resets parasympathetic tone, even while you remain largely tethered to the waking, conscious world. Both the resting nocturnal flora and the briefly sleeping human brain. Utilize this strategic daytime suspension to bridge the long gap toward the night. As the long diurnal rest concludes and the sun begins to lower once more, the evening primrose initiates its most dynamic biological process of the day: structural recovery. At the base of every leaf, the microscopic pulvinous cells actively pump potassium ions back across their membranes, drawing water in and rebuilding the intense cellular turgor pressure needed to lift the heavy leaves. This daily capacity to lose structure and then rebuild it stronger is the botanical equivalent of neuroplasticity. The remarkable ability of your own brain to physically reorganize its synaptic connections after a period of rest. When you wake from a deep sleep, your brain is not merely refreshed, it is fundamentally altered. During the night, specialized proteins structurally reinforced the neural pathways of the things you practiced yesterday, while actively pruning away the trivial data and useless noise that cluttered your short-term memory. Just as the primrose effortlessly drops yesterday's wilted blossoms, shedding what is no longer biologically necessary, this leaves the newly grown neural architecture clean, highly receptive, and primed for complex learning. Neuroplasticity requires the profound physical exhaustion of deep sleep in order to execute these structural upgrades. There is no cognitive growth without the prior biological surrender of the system. The plant yields to gravity, so it can rise again. Your brain yields to unconsciousness, so it can physically evolve, ready to encounter the exact same environment, but with an entirely upgraded architecture to process it. Even as the evening primrose physically prepares to reopen, a vital internal cleansing process continues. Botanists note that diurnal metabolic waste, the chemical byproducts of daytime heat stress, are actively pushed down into the root system and harmlessly expelled into the surrounding soil, leaving the plant's vascular channels pristine, unobstructed, and ready to channel fresh nutrients. This profound biological cleansing mirrors the absolute necessity of the human glymphatic system, where cerebrospinal fluid washes rhythmically over your brain tissue during your deepest sleep cycles. Research confirms that this system physically flushes out neurotoxic proteins, including amyloid beta, the exact protein fragments whose accumulation is strongly linked to cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. Just as the primrose would choke on its own metabolic exhaust without this nocturnal flush, your neurons require the physical shrinkage of surrounding cells during sleep to allow this fluid to pass. This process cannot occur during wakefulness. The biological machinery simply does not align. It requires the absolute surrender of physical consciousness, the total yielding to the dark, to execute the deep cleaning that preserves your mental clarity, your memory, and your long-term cognitive health. Both the flora and the human mind are fundamentally sustained by what they are willing to let go of, allowing the long, quiet tide of sleep to wash away everything that no longer serves survival. As the night enters its final third, the sleeping architecture shifts into its most profound phase. Botanists observing the evening primrose record a phenomenon known as circadian nutation, where the plant's stem typically traces slow, elliptical circles to maximize light exposure. But in these deep nocturnal hours, this exploratory movement completely and entirely ceases, mechanically anchoring the plant in a state of absolute, energy-conserving biological stillness. This botanical lockdown perfectly mirrors the extended periods of REM atonia you are experiencing right now. In your brainstem, specialized clusters of neurons actively release powerful inhibitory neurotransmitters, sending signals down your spinal cord to deliberately paralyze your major voluntary muscle groups, ensuring that your physical body remains exactly as motionless as the resting wild flora. Even as your mind enters its longest, most vivid and intense dreaming cycles of the night. Clinical research in sleep medicine shows that these late-night REM periods are crucial for emotional integration. While your body is locked in stillness, your cerebral cortex is operating at maximum electrical activity. Just as the primrose maintains absolute physical silence above ground while its internal root system thrives, both organisms adopt this vital dual-state profound physical paralysis, supporting intense internal biological processing, allowing the deepest psychological and cellular repairs to fully complete before the impending dawn. While the brain's glymphatic system washes the central nervous system, a parallel process occurs throughout the rest of your body. Deep underground, the evening primrose root system reaches thermal equilibrium with the coolest layers of the soil, allowing sluggish, nutrient-rich fluids to slowly accumulate and filter through its intricate underground branching. This perfectly mirrors the nightly work of your lymphatic system, a vast network of vessels mirroring your veins, which relies on the deep muscular relaxation and horizontal posture of sleep to effectively drain interstitial fluid. Just as the deep roots pull heavy metabolic byproducts away from the upper plant structure, your lymphatic system actively transports cellular waste, toxins, and large proteins away from your tissues, moving them toward the lymph nodes for processing and eventual elimination. This process is significantly hindered by daytime vertical posture, making the horizontal gravity of sleep absolutely essential. Notice how the broad leaves of the primrose rest as flat as possible, minimizing energetic demand, while inside, the slow, rhythmic pulsation of its vascular tissue continues unabated, mirroring the slow, spontaneous contractions of your lymphatic vessels in the dark. By morning, both the plant's structural core and your own bodily tissues have been thoroughly washed and reset, free from the inflammatory load that accumulates during the active, stressful hours of the day. A nightly biological tide that guarantees the fundamental health of the organism upon waking. As the core temperature reaches its lowest nocturnal baseline, a secondary chemical cascade begins within the silent architecture of the primrose. Botanical research highlights the nocturnal redistribution of auxin, a primary plant hormone, which actively migrates to the shadowed, resting cellular regions to stimulate tissue repair, driving microscopic cellular elongation and structural reinforcement exclusively in the dark. This botanical growth phase perfectly mirrors the peak physiological restoration of your own body. During your deepest slow-wave sleep, your pituitary gland releases concentrated pulses of human growth hormone, flooding your bloodstream with the exact peptides required to synthesize new muscle proteins and repair the micro-tears accumulated through the physical demands of your waking day. Just as the plant's auxin requires the absolute absence of ultraviolet light to function efficiently, your pituitary gland relies on the sustained, uninterrupted delta wave frequencies of deep sleep. Without this profound neurological quiet, the hormonal release is prematurely halted, leaving the cellular architecture of both the flora and the human body functionally incomplete. But tonight, sheltered safely in the undisturbed depths of the circadian trough, both you and the resting meadow achieve absolute biological renewal at the cellular level. As the night advances into its third cycle of rapid eye movement, the evening primrose's root system engages in a complex form of biological hydrotropism. Microscopic sensors at the root cap detect the precise spatial gradients of water and permanently alter their cellular architecture to grow toward the richest hydration zones, creating a physical, structural memory of the subterranean landscape for future survival. This botanical mapping precisely mirrors the spatial memory consolidation occurring in your hippocampus right now, where specialized neurons, known as place cells and grid cells, fire in synchronized patterns, actively replaying the physical routes and environments you navigated during the waking day. Neuroscientists observe that during these extended REM periods, your spatial awareness is solidified. Just as the primrose roots permanently lock their new directional growth into the damp earth, both you and the wild flora use the darkness to literally map your surroundings, ensuring that when the morning arrives, you can navigate your environment with zero conscious effort, transferring complex navigational data from short-term holding into permanent cortical architecture, allowing your waking mind to move through the world with absolute, automated physical confidence, securely anchored in the spatial intelligence built exclusively during this deep nocturnal suspension. But what happens when the necessary conditions for this profound rest are violently interrupted? Botanists observe that when the evening primrose faces acute environmental stress, like severe nocturnal dehydration, it engages in a survival mechanism that closely resembles localized biological microsleep. Specific clusters of cells across the leaf epidermis spontaneously and involuntarily shut down their metabolic functions, losing turgor pressure in isolated patches, while the rest of the plant struggles to remain active. This fragmented botanical exhaustion perfectly mirrors the neurological phenomenon of human local sleep, where severe sleep deprivation forces small, localized groups of neurons in your cerebral cortex to literally fall asleep and emit slow delta waves even while you are fully awake. If the sleep debt grows too large, your brain forces a systemic, involuntary microsleep, a sudden, uncontrollable lapse of consciousness lasting only fractions of a second, where the thalamus abruptly blocks sensory input, plunging the mind into immediate protective darkness. Just as the wilted plant sacrifices temporary structural integrity to prevent total systemic cellular collapse, your nervous system shuts off the waking world to protect your neural architecture from permanent damage. Both the wild flora and the human mind possess biological fail-safes that cannot be overridden, proving that profound rest is not a physiological option, but an absolute structural mandate for survival. As the physical structure of the primrose recovers, a deeper, invisible process begins. Botanists increasingly refer to a phenomenon that borders on the poetic plant memory. While plants lack neurons, they encode the day's experiences, drought, heat, or insect damage, directly into their genetic material through a nighttime process called epigenetic methylation. The plant is literally rewriting its biological code in the dark, preparing a stronger defense for tomorrow. This molecular botanical memory perfectly mirrors the emotional processing of human dreams. During REM sleep, your brain replays the most stressful and emotionally charged events of your day. But it does so in a completely paralyzed, neurochemically safe environment, where the stress hormone noradrenaline is entirely shut off, allowing you to confront anxiety without panic. Just as the plant encodes environmental stress to build future resilience, your dreaming mind strips the painful emotional charge from your memories, leaving behind only the essential, learned information embedded in your neural structure. This profound nightly editing prevents both the flora and the human mind from being overwhelmed by the accumulated traumas of existence, converting raw survival data into quiet wisdom, allowing both organisms to face the dawn fundamentally, structurally, and emotionally renewed. As the deep night stretches into its final, most extended cycle, the evening primrose prepares to open its final, most resilient nocturnal blossoms, actively pushing its last reserves of cellular hydration directly into the apical meristem, to ensure successful reproduction can occur even in these fleeting pre-dawn hours. This final, intense botanical push perfectly mirrors your own neurobiology right now. As your brain enters its longest and most vivid rapid eye movement phase, research in Nature Neuroscience details how this specific terminal REM sleep period is scientifically proven to be absolutely critical for complex problem-solving and emotional integration. Your longest dreams occur right before waking, actively constructing highly elaborate cognitive scenarios, just as the primrose opens its most complex, heavily scented terminal flowers, releasing a final surge of volatile organic compounds into the rapidly cooling air. Both systems are performing their most advanced biological synthesis of the entire night, seamlessly connecting disparate neural networks while finalizing the plant's highly complex botanical structures. Solidifying everything learned and gathered before the sun demands a systemic state change, maximizing the profound isolation of the dark to finalize their vital nocturnal work. As the terminal REM cycle concludes and the deep biological night comes to an end, the evening primrose initiates the final phase of its structural recovery. Microscopic observation reveals water flooding back into the cellular vacuoles at the base of each leaf, restoring maximum turgor pressure to physically lift the heavy foliage from its nocturnal resting posture, locking the entire botanical architecture into a state of rigid, daytime alertness. This profound structural reinflation directly parallels the neurological architecture of your own awakening, where the deep, paralyzing delta waves of the night are actively overridden by surging alpha frequencies, re-establishing conscious muscle tone and pulling your nervous system out of its protective suspension. Just as the evening primrose drops its exhausted terminal blossoms to conserve energy for the coming sun, your newly awakened brain effortlessly discards the chaotic, vivid imagery of your final dreams, leaving behind only the integrated emotional resilience and strengthened memory structures built in the dark. This profound physical and cognitive transition is the final, essential mechanism of biological rest. Both organisms have successfully survived the vulnerability of the night, utilizing the absolute stillness to scrub toxins, rewrite genetic resilience, and map the future, ready to face the intense radiation of the waking world completely, structurally, and functionally reborn. And so, our quiet journey through the nocturnal life of the evening primrose comes to a close. We began with the fading twilight, tracing the precise moment the plant's phytochrome receptors signaled the biological shutdown of photosynthesis, mirroring your own pineal gland's release of melatonin. We watched the plant enter its deepest metabolic suspension, perfectly synchronized with your slow-wave delta sleep, and traveled beneath the earth to witness the selective filtration of the Casparian strip, a biological parallel to the emotional filtering and memory consolidation occurring in your own hippocampus. The wild flora and the human mind are fundamentally connected by this shared reliance on the dark, a structural necessity that uses profound stillness to repair, to cleanse, and to physically evolve. If this quiet exploration into botanical sleep science helped you find your own deep rest tonight, perhaps a gentle like or subscribe could help another restless mind discover this sanctuary. One quiet night, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, there is absolutely nothing left for you to do. Allow your breathing to deepen. Let the heavy, restorative waves of the night carry you. If your eyes are still open, another botanical sleep journey is waiting for you. But if they are closed, stay right here. Rest well, sleepy soul. Good night.
Thank you.